Night City, the city of dreams. A place where someone could make a name for themselves, seek out opportunities and prosper from all the scenes built up there, eventually having their name written within the history books as they become legend. However, under the glossy neon lights is a darker side to this city. As opportunities rise for individuals, corporate greed sets in, taken from those less fortunate. Gangs of criminals take over areas by force, starting wars amongst each other. And at the top of the businesses, corruption runs rampant, as everyone seeks to become the next big thing within this grand city. But Night City never had this goal in mind on its inception. Night City was meant to be something different, a place free from all of the things it now houses, and a turning point for humanity going into the 21st century. But now in the year of 2077, those once ideas have gone, destroyed by corruption, and now Night City is a broken, scarred city that houses some of the most terrifying gangs, dangerous criminals, and amoral politicians. So why was Night City set up? Who created it, and what was their vision for it? How did it all go so wrong for humanity, and what principles does Night City have now within the year of 2077? Well, in today's video we take a closer look at the bright, attractive city that has a much darker, broken undercoating that seeks to either make or break individuals. This is the story of Cyberpunk 2077's Night City. Night City's whole story comes from one man. This man being Richard Knight. Born in 1954, Knight was raised within Pasadena, California, and was the second of his 5 siblings. Both of his parents were extremely intelligent scientists, working as researchers for the company of Caltech, which specialized in material science. As Knight began to grow, he found an instant love for engineering, and from a young age up until his early adult years, worked hard to make sure he had a career set on this skill. However, as he went into college to study this subject, Knight had a huge, bitter falling out with his roommate and co-business owner, Romney Zukarian, and because of it instantly changed his career path from engineering to business financial investment, allowing him to become well versed with the ins and outs of business and being able to regain his company that he once ran with his old roommate to now run on his own. As Knight became more and more successful going into the 1990s, his influence grew around the country as he combined both his engineering skills with his business skills. However, there was a new problem. Knight became increasingly aware that there was to be a horrific financial crash coming soon that would devastate the country and most likely the rest of the world. With rumors of this passing through the news outlets, violence started to take place on the streets, as well as a huge disruption to business as the country went into ultimate panic mode. On top of this, his work on corporate funded projects was becoming incredibly tedious, and Knight was getting frustrated with it all. Knight knew he had to do something to save himself as well as the economy, and because of this, Knight went on to set up a side company known as Knight International, drawing up plans to create this brand new, never before seen utopia of a city that would be controlled and managed by the corporations and would be free from any form of economic collapse that may hit the rest of the country and the world. It was to be completely planned, self-sufficient, and capable of holding off even the most determined criminals from taking over. On top of that, its whole plan was to make sure it was extremely diverse, showcasing areas from all different cultures and nationalities. And on top of all that, would have a capital that was said to be a beacon of enlightened capitalism. It was a plan no one had ever seen before, but it was immediately praised for its overall ambition. Straight away, corporations got involved looking to set up their urban areas, making sure the governments involved were to be corporation linked, to make sure that no anti-business elements came to fruition, and that they could constantly thrive within the city. And by 1992, Arasaka, EBM, and Petrochem had all signed onto Knight's plan of corporate utopia. Scouting all over America, Knight finally found the place he was going to make his city in. That was to be within Morro Bay. Morro Bay had just been hit recently by an incident being only described as a post-Holocaust horror, most likely brought on by the financial collapse. Now it lay as just a barren ghost town, and Knight knew it was perfect for him to convert. With this, Knight and Petrochem bought the land and started building there, with Petrochem taking over the nearby power plant within the town and looking to set up an offshore port and oil terminal site. With this all set up, Knight and other members of his group of corpos hired the Arasaka Corporation to remove the nearby street gangs to make sure the area was safe to continue the construction. By now, other corporations had got involved in this process as land was being turned over to make way for this new city. The same happened to the sea as land was dumped into it to make sure the hills and mountains were now flattened and widened by 10 miles. By 1994, the construction was in full swing, but there was a new problem. The corporations that were the main financial backers were not construction companies, meaning they could not pour resources into that other than money. Because of this, they had to seek outsider help. This came, but in the form of the mob. The mafia and the yakuza, as well as others, started getting involved and having a stranglehold on the heavy construction jobs. With this, they then went on to control all of the unions as well as the governmental agencies in charge of construction licenses, environmental impacts, and other building necessities. Because of how smart the mob were in this, not only did they now control the construction side of the city, they also made sure they had investment in the city itself, pouring tons of money into the partnership, allowing them to have gambling, prostitution, and drug franchises within the city when it opened. But although they had all of this planned, Knight had other ideas. His utopia of a city needed to be built with specific materials in some areas. Those materials could not be acquired by the construction companies owned by the mob. On top of this, Knight also made sure that the city was to be crime-free and shut down their ideas of how the mob wanted to run it. With these things in place and Knight bringing in his old associates known as Halsey, Ferris, and Skiv, the mob were furious and sought to bring down Knight to take over the full project of his city. After 4 long years of construction, Knight's life became hard. Every day he would get death threats and assassination attempts. Eventually, threats of sabotage and intimidation started to take place, and because of it, he had to bring in his corporate partners to deal with this farce, not holding back. Whilst for a bit the corporations were dealing with it, Knight eventually paid the price for going against the mob. On the 20th of September 1998, Knight was shot and killed in his penthouse suite at the top of the newly constructed Parkview Tower. With this assassination taking place, the project that was known as the Coronado City was renamed to honor the man who started it all. The project was now to be known as Knight City, and with his death, his wife Miriam reconstructed his company and founded the Knights Foundation to make sure that his vision of his perfect city was to be honored and encouraged. But with Knight now out of the way, it was time for a new era within its early construction of Knight City. Now was the era of mob rule. The year was now 2005, and the mob of the Mafia and the Yakuza were the dominant force within the Del Coronado Bay area. The corporations were still here within the city, however they had now set up their strongholds within the newly constructed corporate plaza. But realistically, the corporations had no real interest in running the city, and because of their lack of involvement, it meant the city's council struggled to get anything done. They ultimately needed their involvement. Because of this decision by the corpos, the mob started putting in place corrupt mob-selected politicians to use as their puppets to make sure what they wanted went ahead. This would then allow them to set up contracts with their colleagues, setting up drug and extortion deals, and inviting the worst elements of the collapse into their city. With all this happening, Night City became one of the worst places to live, with war zones taking over, crime, drugs and prostitution being the norm, and violence happening on a regular basis. Between the years of 2005 and 2009, Night City became one of the most hostile places to live within America, with more crimes happening within a 4-year span than there were in other cities within a 10-year span. The mob ran everything in a terrifying way, shutting down anyone who opposed them and their ideas. With this, gangs were appearing left, right and centre, with gangs such as the Blood Raisers and the Slaughterhouse making their appearance on the streets. By this point in time, the Night City Police Department were experiencing so many murders on the streets that their unsolved murder documents had risen into the thousands. By 2009, the warring streets of Night City were getting worse. The mega corporations could not stand idly by anymore, and eventually the likes of Arasaka, Kangtao, Militech and others stood up and started to try and fight back to take back Night City from the mob. This started what would be known as the Mob War of 2009 to 2011, where troops trained and owned owned by Arasaka would drop in with assault vehicles, fan tanks, and air vehicles and would target those powerful members of the mob, hitting them with bombing runs, assassinations, as well as general street battles. This would be a relatively easy win as the mob's ground forces were not prepared to tackle these highly advanced troops with state-of-the-art weaponry. With the corporations now taking back the city, it was time for them to take back control as they went on to place a puppet mayor in power to do their work for them. With this, the corpos began cleaning the city and bringing back its beautiful, pristine look to it. However, this made a new problem. Because all of the housing was being upgraded and the city was undergoing the gentrification process, affordable housing was going out of the window, and the homeless communities were rising as they had nowhere to live, with prices skyrocketing everywhere. But as these people were thrown out of their homes, the corpo troops were put into them, meaning that the streets were safe once again, even if it meant that the regular people were to suffer from poverty. The year was now 2013, and the mob presence was essentially gone from Night City, as the corpos had taken back full control through their incredible force. However, on the streets, people were still outraged with the corporations for what they had done to their city, making it extremely expensive to live in and chucking them out onto the streets. In a protest, the musician and activist known as Johnny Silverhand performed a free show in front of the Arasaka Tower with his band. This gig led to a riot forming at the tower, with troops being called in to control the situation. But Johnny had another plan during this, and that was to rescue his girlfriend of the time, Alt Cunningham, who was being used by Arasaka to develop a software called the Soul Killer, a program that could be used to download any netrunner's mind and access all of their important information on another corporation or anything they really wanted. Alt had knowledge of this software as she previously worked for ITS, the original creators of this software. After their gig outside of the tower, Johnny, along with Rogue, media reporter Thompson, and a nomad named Santiago, infiltrated the tower to try and recover Alt, who was trapped within the computer with her body just lying there. Toshiro, a high-up member of Arasaka, tried desperately to stop Johnny, but in a rage over what they had done to Alt, Johnny killed him and tried to disconnect her from the computer. Unaware that her presence was still there just behind him, Johnny disconnected her from the mainframe, believing she was dead. However, disconnecting her killed her in the process, as she screamed for his help, with him unable to hear her. By 2020, Night City began to thrive from the corporations. However, a lot of fear ran down on the streets, with almost everyone carrying guns on their way to work. Whilst it was far from the dream of Richard Knight, Night City worked relatively well with the NCPD and the corporations shutting down crime and keeping the streets relatively safe. But once again, like with all of Night City's history, a new era was to take place as the corporations started to get heated amongst one another. This new era would be known as the Fourth Corporate War. Corporate wars weren't a new thing, and they were always ultimately over the same thing. They usually consisted of corporations using their military power to take over other corporations who had entered bankruptcy or had just completely fallen. This time with the Fourth Corporate War, it was between the corporations of Ocean Technology and Energy Corporation and Sino, who were trying desperately to take over IHAG, who had recently gone bankrupt. Both sides used netrunners to ruin their reputation, with Sino using them to devalue OTEC stock. Both used attacks that were ultimately aimed at devaluing the other one, to try and get one of them to back off from the acquisition. However, neither backed down, with tension getting higher by the day, with the rest of the world panicking, thinking there would be a new global crisis, as ultimately ocean-based goods and shipping were essential, and without this the world would be in panic once again. As no one could break through, there was a stalemate between the corpos. However, eventually OTEC hired the American armaments manufacturer Militech to help them with their situation, and Sino hired the Japanese armaments megacorp of Arasaka to help them. Tension was high still, but nothing ultimately happened, until one day where an Arasaka advisor was killed by Militech at an OTEC facility. With this, a war broke out between the Arasaka and Militech forces, with the war becoming far more personal rather than just business. With this war, multiple cities were evacuated because of it, such as Rio de Janeiro and Busan. However, Night City saw the worst of this conflict in 2023. Militech saw saw an opportunity to take out Arasaka once and for all, destroying their database and making it completely unusable, making them weak compared to the other mega corporations. With this, Militech assigned a small group of individuals, including Johnny Silverhand, to invade the Arasaka building and plant a mini nuke at the top of their tower within Night City. This mini nuke was then detonated, with Militech not really caring for how devastating it would really be, as they now did not care at all for Night City. The bomb was horrific, wiping out the whole of the 140-floor tower, killing 12,000 people in the process. The blast then raged on and turned most of inner Night City into rubble in a matter of seconds. Because of where Night City was also built, it also meant that it was now subject to minor earthquakes, which caused the inner city to completely flood. Inner Night City was essentially destroyed, all thanks to the two warring megacorporations. By 2023, the city was entering the time of red as the dust surrounded the city, and every time it was hit by sunlight, it would turn everything a bright crimson. Despite all of this, however, Night City still wasn't the most affected city in all of this. Rio de Janeiro, Busan, and Hong Kong had been hit far harder by all of these warring factions, and the collapse had had thousands evacuating them. Lots of the residents of Greater Night City also started leaving their areas and moved north, south, and east as soon as they could. But the people that moved there weren't looking to rebuild communities or set up new homes. Their plans were simple. They just needed to look for food, clean water, and shelter to ultimately just survive after the horrors of the global collapse. But Militech and Arasaka were still at each other's throats by the years of 2025 and 2035, with President Elizabeth Kress, the ex-Militech CEO, blaming Arasaka for the attack on the city. Her conspiracy was that Arasaka had caused the explosion to stop Militech from seizing their Night City office. The strike team, on the other hand, consisting of Johnny Silverhand and Rebel, was majorly covered up, and no one knew who was ultimately responsible for this, with them only being labelled as a generic terrorist group seeking to stop corporate colonialism. But by this point, Kress had made out that Arasaka were the evil ones. They were the problem within the country, and they were essentially run by a madman who only wanted to destroy an American city. Kress at this point was the president of the new United States of America, but it became clear that she had no interest in rebuilding Night City. Instead, it was a lost cause. Throughout all of this, however, Night City still remained outside of government control and resisted the rule of what was the new United States run by Elizabeth Kress. Without the funding of Arasaka or help from the new United States, Night City had to seek other corporations and individuals to help rebuild the city and bring it back to how it was before, especially now as homelessness was at an all-time high because of the mini nuke event. This brought in small corporations and edge runners, but more importantly nomad tribes such as the Odocados, to help with the construction. To get more people involved, the Night City government offered free cybernetics that allowed them to work in hazardous areas such as Ground Zero to finally make it safe again. By 2045, Night City was still being rebuilt, with many areas such as the combat zone and the original heart of the metropolis being devastated still. But by this point in their rebuilding process, Night City looked to form a relationship with the outer world. With President Kress turning her back on them, Night City wanted no part in the new United States of America and sought to side with someone else. In a time like this, the public hit back at Kress and Militech and decided they wanted Arasaka, the megacorp who had been thrown out of America, to be the ones they aligned with again. The Asian corporation in the public's eyes were more appealing than submitting to federal rule of the new United States of America, with the city even stating they would request their aid if the government ever tried to take Night City by force. On top of this, the EEC, the European Economic Community, and the Soviet Union set up trade links within the city, with the Night City Council considering them pleasant trading partners who could do what they want as long as they didn't disrupt the harmony of the city. By the 2060s, Night City was thriving again as their council started looking at ways to bring in tourism and fund an economic recovery, setting up the area of Pacifica, which would be a huge new area that was a paradise for anyone visiting, with luxury hotels and pools right by the sea. Euro dollars were poured into this area with digits hitting the billions. However, a series of problems meant that construction was to be shut down. The first being within the year of 2063, as a series of zoonotic diseases started spreading all over. This led to the Night City Council to start the Avian Extermination Act, which exterminated all birds within 18 miles of the city limits. Household pets were allowed to be kept, however a lot of the animal wildlife within Night City disappeared, most likely being killed by this disease. The other problem was caused yet again by the new president of the new United States of America, as he plunged the country into a new age. This time between 2069 and 2076 would be known as the Unification War. Rosalind Myers, another ex-Militech CEO, had now been elected as the new president of the new United States of America at the end of 2069. Immediately on her presidency, Myers wanted to bring all of the free states into one nation run by them. This was to supposedly heal them and bring them all together as one unit. However, the free states majorly opposed this and immediately started conflicting against the new United States of America forces. During this time, Night City was part of the free state of North California, otherwise known as NorCal, and didn't want any part in this unification war. This meant they were in the middle of two warring factions, with its residents waiting every day for federal troops to invade the city and take it for themselves. In early 2070, this happened, and as the forces got closer to their border, the councilman at the time, Lucius Rhine, called upon the Arasaka Corporation to protect them from the forces trying to take their city. Within a few days, Arasaka sent a supercarrier to the Del Coronado Bay, immediately scaring off the new United States of America troops, forcing them to retreat. With Arasaka forces now this close to American soil, ready to defend territory from the new United States of America forces, President Myers was fearful this would only increase the war and involve Japanese forces, so immediately ended the war. As a treaty went out, most did not like the terms, but preferred it than continuing a war, so signed for it. However, for Night City it was beneficial, as it deemed it as a free city, without having to answer to the government and laws of NorCal or the new United States of America. It was officially a free city. With this, Night City appointed the new mayor of Lucius Rhine and gave Arasaka a seat within the council, allowing them to build their new American HQ in the downtown area on the same site where their previous office had been destroyed in 2023. Night City was prospering once again, and for the most part the residents were happy. However, some investors tried to continue the Pacifica project, but the local community opposed this, with the NCPD trying to take it back by force, but to no avail, as a bloodbath ensued, with the police force losing too many troops to take over the area. Because of this, the Pacifica project fell through, and slowly it turned into the new combat zone, a lawless area of Night City where anything goes. By the second half of the 2070s, Arasaka was asserting its dominance within the city, taking over a number of corporate rivals and building up their forces within Watson on what is now called the Arasaka waterfront, a place that was suspicious to a lot of the Night City residents, worrying Arasaka was getting up to no good and ready to take over. By 2074, Night City celebrated its 80th anniversary. However, sadly that same year, there was a rise in cyber-psycho attacks in Kabuki, which killed 3 individual citizens. With this happening, the president of the new United States of America, Rosalind Myers, once again offered to help Night City to protect them, offering Militech support. Hearing these words from the president, however, the Night City Police Commissioner massively criticized them at the time. By 2077, Night City was still under the rule of Mayor Ryan, with him due for re-election this same year. However, before this could happen, Ryan unexpectedly died, with his death being attributed to the implants regulating his heart malfunctioning. With the temporary mayor in place, it was up to the people to vote between Weldon Holt, the deputy mayor at the time, or Jefferson Perales, as well as a few other candidates. Perales would ultimately be victorious and would lead Night City into a new age, hopefully one of growth and prosperity that could maybe bring about the original vision of Richard Knight back in 1994. To this day, Night City has gone through a series of eras, experiencing some of its darkest ever days, especially within the 2020s. But now the people try and thrive in this unique city. Maybe they can seek out a way to stand out and become a legend. But has Night City really changed? Will it be a completely free city? Or will the corporations of Arasaka or Militech try and take it back for themselves? Who knows? But if anything, it's clear that Night City will always be a corrupt, broken place to live. And the thought of it ever changing is just a wild dream at this point. And that is the background story of Night City, the city of dreams from the Cyberpunk universe. Whether you like the game or not, the lore is really interesting, at least in my opinion, and there is so much detail on even the little things. And hopefully if this does well, then maybe we can explore more of its universe. But I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. If you did, leave a like, leave a nice comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out my other lore videos in the playlist below, and if you really like this video and channel, then why not become a Patron or YouTube channel member to get early access to these videos, as well as them being completely ad-free. And speaking of which, I'd like to thank my supporters real quick. Big thanks to our small fish guys, our big fishes Duquesne23, Sacrum, Rhino Head, Eddie, Christopher, Andrew, Last Persona User, and Arto Krem, our sharks Well Such Gaming, and Connor, and our huge megalodons, Sinus, Jacob Garcia, Chernobyl Stalker, Shadow SGT, and Ryan Everett. Also big shout out to our YouTube channel members, our wise ones Jambu and Fiery Italian, as well as all my amazing subscribers over on Twitch. All your support means the world to me and means I can make these videos for you guys, so thank you all so much. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.